friends. Today we're going to have a little bit of fun. We are going to talk about the future. What awaits humanity in the years and decades and millennia to come? Now, a lot of psychics and mediums have talked about the time right now being a real tumultuous time, but also a time of awakening. And that in the future, there's going to be some sort of golden age of humanity. I mean, even Nostradamus talked about this back in the, 1500s? Well, interestingly enough, we often talk about past life regressions where you go under hypnosis and remember your past lives, right? I've done videos all about that. There are also future life progressions where you can go and visit future lives. There's a book written by Brian Weiss all about future life progressions. And I noticed as we were reading through these future lives that there are commonalities across it. So I thought it would be fun to dig through the future life progression information that's out there, kind of combine it with the other sort of psychic medium information and population statistics, because population growth and decline, I think, is part of this. I partnered up with my good friend Claude AI to sculpt this into like a area by area, epic by epic sort of progression. So let's look at what the future holds for us. So first, let's talk about right now and what we're going through. Some of you have heard about the age of Aquarius or 2012, the Mayan calendar, and how everything was supposed to end, and yet we're still here. This is all because we're entering a new version of reality, of energy, of humanity. Up until now, we've had very structural, organized sorts of humanity. And as we're moving into this new phase of thought and belief and spirituality, etc., we're finding a lot of things churning up as the transition happens. And this is also a time when we're really being called to awaken. If you listen to Eckhart Tolle, who you know I love, he will talk about, that's the whole purpose of his book, A New Earth. It's that right now is a time where we are waking up. You are part of that. You are waking up right now, even just by tuning into this video. So it's a time of chaos. It's a time where the earth is very dynamic and eruptive, and there's all sorts of wars and earthquakes and all sorts of things. But this is all getting us ready for the next phase. This is going to go on through the year 2050, roughly. You can think of this as the Great Transition. This is the period where we're adjusting for what is to come. And it's a really potent time as well. In Brian Weiss's book, he talks a lot about that the choices that we make right now will ripple forward. And in fact, there are a variety of different timelines as you dig into the information that all eventually converge in the future. So how we show up and wake up now can really set the experience for humanity in the time ahead. So when we look at population, obviously we have a huge population growth. We're looking at about 8 billion to 10 billion people in this time period. So we've got a lot of people and we have a lot of chaos. This is a time, as I said, of awakening. We have a lot of folks that are choosing to incarnate here right now because we have more bodies available and because there's the most potential for growth and awakening during this really disruptive, hard time. So I know a lot of people talk about how hard their life is right now, how hard it is to be alive. This is sort of intentional. I think a lot of souls chose the harder route for this time period because they knew that this would give them the biggest potential for spiritual growth, sort of like a fast forward pass, if you will. Okay, so let's look around. We got a lot of people. We got dense urban environments. We have AI coming into play. We are becoming a lot more interconnected on the internet right here with YouTube. YouTube, for example, communities and people all around the world sharing content is now coming into the mainstream. And those old mega structures, right, are crumbling. This is bringing in the next step. We are losing trust in political institutions. We are losing trust in corporations and in government. People are leaving religion, not everybody, but a lot of people are going into alternative spirituality and other ways to understand and interpret the world. And of course, climate pressures are becoming more visible. What does daily life look like? Well, you're experiencing it. We've got information overload, we have anxiety, a lot of change, and a lot of adaptation. And so in each of these time periods, I'm also going to talk about what the soul lesson opportunity is. So when we look at right now, the opportunity is about discernment. We have so much information coming at us. We need to decide what is true and what is not true, what we can trust, what we can't trust. Particularly with the age of AI, this is all becoming so much more relevant. And also focusing on what deserves your attention. As we continue to go through the time period, you're going to see this idea of your awareness, your consciousness, and how powerful it is, and where you place your awareness grows things. So it is in this time period that we become a lot more aware and intentional about where we are focusing our energy. You're finding more and more people not wanting to pay attention to news for just this reason, because we don't want to continue to feed this negativity bias. Okay, that's now. Let's keep on going into the future. The next era we are going to look at is 2050 through 2100. The Great Rebalancing. Now, some of you are going to be alive during this time period. I hope I will be. So some of you will be able to experience this firsthand. And for some of you, this may be your future life, though you might choose to take a little break before you come in again, because this round was probably hard enough and you might like a little break. But there will be a lot of bodies available still, because population will continue to be going strong. Per the data, we should be about 10.3 billion in 2084. 2084 per prediction, and I don't mean psychic prediction, I mean like scientific sociological prediction, is when we should be seeing the most people on the planet. And it is after 2084 that we will begin to see a decline. I think this is kind of interesting, because I keep hearing a lot of people that say, I don't want to come back again. Well, there will be less bodies. And I think that's actually part of the plan, that we're not going to have as many people incarnating on the planet. We're going to have people graduating this Earth realm. So in this time period, the Great Rebalancing, we're going to see a lot of societal shifts. And these old systems will really begin to crack. I mean, they're cracking now. And when we get into the 2050, 2100, that's really going to be crumbling. Again, societies are really going to be shaken up because our populations are greatly going to shift. Now, the reason why we're even getting up to that number is because of Africa. Africa is the area where the population is still growing, but in a lot of the other countries around the world, Europe, North America, Asia, etc., populations are declining. So by this time period, societies will really be feeling that we have a lot more older folks and less younger folks. That is going to drive a lot of shifts. It has to. And when we look at those future life progressions, we hear people describing a lot more open land and smaller communities as this phase continues forward. So what's happening? We have government restructuring. We have the evolution of economic systems. We have energy systems changing dramatically, right? By that point, we're really going to be turning the tide on climate change and how we use electricity, hopefully before then, but certainly in this time period, we will be in a new way of developing energy. So when we look at daily life, we're gonna find that people are less reliant on systems, right? And more reliant on community and connection. There's gonna be more emphasis on shared resources and sharing food locally, and a lot more about becoming self-sufficient. These big structures have proven not to be able to really support us, so people are coming together a bit more. So it's in this period that it's also likely that we're going to see a lot of decline of factory farming and a lot more alternative meat options, and animal welfare becomes a bit more mainstream. So when we look at the soul lessons of this era, this is still going to be a challenging time period, right? This is still a shift. We still have those systems, and we are learning adaptability in this time period because all of these structures are shifting or falling away. We are needing to be a bit more flexible and finding a new way forward. The game that we're playing here in human form is still going to be hard, but those structures, the infrastructure around suffering and war and scarcity and all of that are beginning to get dismantled. Again, we're talking about this is the pathway to the golden age. This is part of the process as we get there, which then takes us into the next millennium, right? Millennium? Century anyway. 2100 to 2200 is the next time period we're going to be digging into. And this is the consciousness renaissance where humanity discovers the mind and consciousness specifically. This is just 1 or 2 lifetimes away for you. This could be your next lifetime. So keep that in mind when you're talking about not wanting to reincarnate again. The world is going to be different when you come back. So population, it's on its downward slope. We're now talking about 8 to 10 billion in this time period. We're going to find cities become less congested, a lot more emphasis on smaller communities, local communities, because the whole model of technology continues to shift with AI and internet, etc. We don't necessarily have to live in the big cities to work. We're already seeing that now, so imagine what this is going to look like in 100 years when people that are growing up in this mindset, how they redistribute the workforce. And as we begin to divest from these larger structures and begin to really focus in on what we have to create and offer, AI is definitely going to be a part of that, right? AI is going to be taking over a lot of work. And so what does that look like for us? It means that now we find our own ways of offering things, our own ways of contributing. We become a lot more about the individual offerings versus the corporate offerings. So when we look at some of this predictive information, it's around 2100 that is often talked about. I mean, roughly, give or take, a 300-year period of peace. That's something that is talked about quite a bit, which is fascinating to imagine that in just or less than 100 years from now, we could be entering in this long period of peace. This is, I believe, because of the work that's going on right now and all of the awakening and shifting that's happening in this turbulent time period. It's stirring things up. I mean, think how differently things were 100 years ago in 1927. This gives you an idea about how much evolution we have yet to come. And particularly as things are speeding up and evolving even quicker, I think it's going to be an even greater shift in our experience. Now, what's happening? Well, research into consciousness is going to become more mainstream, a lot more interest in spiritual experiences and reincarnation, etc. Obviously, this is happening right now, but this is the early stages of this movement. Right now, this information is fringe. It's a lot less fringe than it used to be, but it's still in its building phase. So when we're talking about 80 years from now, this is going to be something that is more accepted by the vast majority of humanity, particularly when we're talking about consciousness surviving death. Think about all the near-death experiences that we're able to learn about, watch, witness through people sharing on YouTube. That is shifting people's awareness or understanding of what life is about. Now, one of the things that I found fascinating when I would read these future life progressions is they talked about in the future that energy healing was much more commonplace. And often there was this, it was weird because several of them mentioned this healing rod. I don't know. I think that maybe it's like, it was like a crystal. Maybe it's kind of like a crystal like this. I don't know, but apparently there's some sort of a healing rod that is used utilizing energy and energetic frequencies. So it's in this time period that energy healing really becomes more a part of medical practice. I think as we deepen our understanding of consciousness, right? understanding what is underneath reality. Science is getting there as well as they're going into the quantum field and understanding all of that. I think this is the time period where those two worlds begin to interact and begin to understand each other a bit more. And using that information to shift how we take care of our human body and our human psyche. What does daily life look like in this time period? Well, people will still have families, we'll still have stuff we do every day, we'll still work. But there's going to be a lot less emphasis on career status and wealth and accumulation. Not that that's not there. There's going to be a lot less emphasis on the external world and more emphasis on our own consciousness and our own evolution as human beings. When we talk about soul lessons in this time period, the soul lesson opportunity is around self-mastery, specifically a growing and deepening understanding about how our thoughts and emotions create our reality. Obviously, this work is already around, right? We already talk about manifestation, etc. But it's in this time period that there's a deeper understanding of how it works and how we can utilize it. Again, it becomes a lot more commonplace, that idea of utilizing consciousness to create our reality. And of course, here's a good time to ask you to subscribe and to hit the like button. It helps, as we all know, but particularly the reason that it helps is it gets this video out to more people and the channel out to more people, which will help this whole process of becoming more aware of how this cosmic structure works, because that's what I'm all about. I'm all about understanding how reality works from a spiritual and reincarnation perspective so that we can be more intentional in how we live this incarnation. Okay, let's move on to the next time period. 2200 to 2500. We're getting a bit broader as we go further out into the future. This we're going to call the Cooperative Age, where humanity learns to work together. So that's in 200 years. Think about it. 200 years ago, that was prior to the Industrial Revolution. When we look at those future life progressions, this is the time period that I believe is talked the most about. Now, again, they're not giving exact years when they're talking about what their future life experience is, but from everything that we've laid out, this is what makes the most sense as far as when this hits, particularly when we overlay the idea of what intuitive, psychic, medium information has come into play as well. Now, the population continues to decline. We're now talking about estimating 3 to 8 billion people, okay? So the world is getting smaller. It's more about being in community. If we think about what, that time period in 2020 when everything was shut down and we saw wildlife and nature begin to rebound, we're going to be seeing that in this time period as we have less human beings on the planet. Some of the future life progressions talk about seeing more wild animals as well, which makes sense. If we have less people roaming around, there's more space for other animals. We're in this 300-year time of peace. It's going to be a lot more about global cooperation and reducing disparities. Now, we are still human beings, and we still have our biology to contend with. I'm not saying that every human being is going to be wonderful and beautiful and perfect. I'm not saying that everything is going to be easy and pleasant, but I'm saying when we look at things on a larger scale, what the temperature is in general, it's going to be different. Even if you think about right now in this time of chaos, in most countries, we can see a shift from what it was 1,000 years ago when traveling from one town to another, your caravan's going to be likely to get jumped by thieves or whatnot. It was a lot more of a renegade time. There was not a sense of justice, or the justice that was there was very chaotic and not organized and structured. So if you think about how different that is now, it's not that we don't have that stuff happen, but in general, it isn't at the scale or the chaos that it was in the past. This is what we're talking about when we look into the future. I also believe when we look far enough into the future, and this is also what has been talked about in future life progressions that at some point we will become telepathic. I know maybe that sounds weird, but when you look at who we are on a soul level, on the other side, which is our home, which is our natural environment, we communicate telepathically. This is stated over and over and over again in near-death experiences. While we are in human form, we're too dense and our vibration is so low, it's not really safe to communicate telepathically because a lot of people think really horrible things, so we can't really tune into that as clearly. As we begin to evolve as human beings into becoming more aware of our consciousness, developing our minds, this is going to allow in more telepathic communication and awareness. So it's in this time period that I think we start seeing the buds of this. Well, even some people have even seen this now, telepathy tapes, etc. But it's in this time period where we really begin to have more of an understanding of that. And it's not necessarily going to be like we talk head to head at this time period. It's going to be more of a knowing or emotional communication. A lot of you already have some of these abilities where you're able to pick up and feel what other people are putting out. Well, that's going to become more mainstream. The body itself will also shift because some of these future life visions have talked about humanity looking different when you go far enough in the future. So that is going to go along with this evolution of consciousness and this increased telepathy ability is we're going to get taller, our bodies are going to get lighter, right? So that we're holding higher vibrational frequencies. We're continuing on the trend. People are owning less. Homes become smaller. Things become more efficient. Materialism not so important. But in the future life progressions, they also talk about people being happier in this time period. When we look at our animal friends, there's a stronger respect for animal consciousness. As we begin to deepen our understanding of human consciousness, we deepen our understanding of the consciousness of everything we share this planet with. And so we become more harmonious in how we interact with the flora and fauna around us. So the soul lesson in this time period is all about learning cooperation without losing individuality. It kind of mirrors when we look at our human soul ages. Our planet is going through soul ages as well. Right now we are in a yellow time period. Then we go into the green soul age, the more mature soul age. That's what we're talking about in this time period. We're learning how to be both an individual and in relationship with others. We are caring and compassionate about the other people and beings we're sharing the planet with. Well, if that sounds good, let's keep rolling into the future. Now, we're talking about 2,500 to 3,000. We're going to call this time period the unified Earth. When we look at future life progressions, there can be a bit of variation through a lot of the time periods that we've just discussed. But it's in this time period, the further out we go, the more synchronized the recollections and accounts go about what Earth looks like. I think in this time period, we're talking about Earth being in a bit more of an old soul stage. Population has declined dramatically. Now, in the future life progressions, they don't talk about populations numbers specifically. That's why I wanted to work with Claude AI to really project out what is likely based off of what we know of existing population growth. And it lines up with what we're talking about here. Of course, hard to predict statistically because there's a lot of variables we don't know about. But we're thinking that it's about 1.5 billion when we talk about how many people are on the planet. Now think about that. 2084, in just 50 years, 60 years, we're talking about 10 billion. By this point, it's 1/10 of that population. So obviously, nature and wildlife is going to be very abundant. There are going to be less humans that are taking resources from the planet. So let's talk about daily life in this time period, because this could be a future life for you, right? Many of you don't want to come back, but if this is what life looks like, maybe it's not so bad coming back. Maybe some of you don't want to reincarnate into today's society, but when you talk about what life is going to look like in 500 years, not so bad. Healthcare, again, we've already brought in energetic possibilities and principles in previous eras prior to this one. Well, now we're really focusing on healing in the auric layer before it even gets to the physical body layer. Because the body is understood energetically, people understand why acupuncture works and are able to really leverage that knowledge and wisdom to change how we live as human beings. And in each of these time periods, our lifespans get longer and longer. It's possible that in this time period, we live to be 200 years old. This will be really interesting if this actually ends up being the case about what this means for soul evolution. But it would have to mean life needs to be easier, because to sign up for a 200-year lifespan, I mean, I wouldn't do that right now in this world. That's a lot. But in a time period when we're talking about illnesses are dealt with before they get into the physical body, when we're talking about we're working and living harmoniously, communicating telepathically, possibly, all the full woo world, it might be easier to live in this environment. Now, in this time period, we have less people. Structures are totally different. Technology is completely evolved and changed. Our day-to-day life looks drastically different. When we look at what we hear from these future life progressions, we hear more about living a life that is more about creativity, more about leisure, less labor, or more about learning and growing and exploring consciousness. More about really enjoying being a spirit, having a human experience. And I thought this one was fun, that groups can even come together to prevent tsunamis and earthquakes, etc., utilizing energy and consciousness to shift how the world even exists. Now, let's look at the soul level lessons, opportunities in this time period, and it's all about service. It's all about focusing on helping others involved instead of just focusing on the personal self. Again, this is when we're getting into the old soul stage of humanity. Doesn't mean there won't be newer souls that are born here, that are going to be younger souls, etc., that are doing their wackadoo younger soul stuff. But it means there's going to be far more older souls on the planet and that are going to help guide and direct things. Now, let's keep on going to our final stage in our future envisioning. And we're talking about the years 3000 to 5000, quite a bit in the future. If we were comparing, looking backwards from this time period, I think this is the Egyptian age, right? That went on for quite a long time. But think about how far away we are from ancient Egypt. That's how far this time period is. And this is called the Galactic Age, or that's what we're going to call it at least. This is when humanity looks outward. Population, we are thinking about 1 to 3 billion, so probably holding steady about there as we go forward. This seems to be the amount, I bet, that works well, and this is the amount of people that want to incarnate on this planet. I think a lot of people are going to get off the planet after these next 100 years and say, I'm not going back to that planet, and this is why the population gets down to just 1 to 3 billion, because people don't want to come back. So if you don't want to come back, you don't have to. But if you do want to come back to this time period, this is when we are going to be a part of the galactic neighborhood. This is when we have interplanetary travel. We have human settlements beyond Earth. Consciousness and technology merge in this time period. Some reports mention that technology becomes invisible, which makes sense if it merges with consciousness. I mean, we have no concept what that's going to look like. Can you imagine explaining to Egyptian about AI and the internet and YouTube? Now imagine what it would be like from somebody from that era to talk about what technology looks like then. And when we look at the daily life, it continues on with the previous era as far as being focused on creativity and learning and growth and supporting each other. But it also shifts away from being about nationalities to being about soul groups and who we are on a soul level. This is the time period when we're talking about telepathic communication being a part of our experience. So quite a bit off. Again, seeds are planted now as we're figuring out how to manage our mind, our emotions, our consciousness, as we're bringing in all these different types, not bringing in, but increasing all these different types of neurotypes, right? That is really helping support the development of the human mind by having people that are autistic, people that are ADHD, people that have all different types of consciousness and mind functioning. This is preparing the soil for where our minds and our consciousness will go in like 3,000 years. And we will still be learning our soul level lessons. But at this point, this is when we are learning how to co-create with consciousness itself. A lot less definition about being human versus soul, and it all becomes sort of interblended, interconnected. So there's a lot of good stuff coming if we can be patient as souls to stick around, right? This is the hardest time period. This is a really hard time period because we are all utilizing what's available to us to grow as much as possible so that we can get ready to be better beings in the future. Now, like I said, a lot of people are going to choose to not return. When we're talking about 10 billion people down to 1 billion people, if you are one of those people who don't want to come back again, I understand. I did a whole video all about how to use past life regressions to make this your last incarnation. So go ahead and check that out here, and I'll see you in the future, in this life or another one. All right, bye.